I'm going to be talking about the deaf community. So the deaf community comes from, so basically what I'm going to be talking about is who the deaf community is, the type of language they speak, and then it's going to be about how people consider fixing the deaf community. So the deaf community comes, well actually, how many of you have ever actually had an encounter with someone who is deaf or hard of hearing? Okay, so the experience is not difficult, but it's also not impossible. So within the United States, every 2 in 4 people out of 1,000 are actually deaf. May not seem like a lot of huge number, but if you think about it, within Los Angeles, there's millions of people. So it adds up. Another thing, so in my own experience, one time when I had an encounter with someone who was deaf, I was taking an order and I asked him, what did you want, or what would you like to order? And he kind of just stared at me, so I kind of was like, okay, and then I asked again, and that's when he kind of pointed towards his ear, and he just made a notion I can't hear, so that's when I kind of understood that I had to do something else. So instead of speaking to him, I was showing him the menu, asking what he would like, and then he would nod yes or no, but I also noticed how he was looking at my lips, so he was my natural reaction was to speak to him and use my voice. But to him, he was reading my lips, so I just made sure I was pronunciating everything as good as best as I could, and that's how kind of, it was a little longer, but we got it done. So yeah, so the deaf community is, it doesn't really matter, there is no specific person or type of person that it affects, it can be anybody. So according to Beth Bennett from voicesandhands.org in 2014. Right now, there's the deaf organizations. There's many different kinds of organizations that help the deaf community. There is Deaf Olympics. There is organizations that help with interpreters, whether it is at church, whether it is at things like a city council meeting, or things that they just try to basically incorporate people within the deaf community to feel a part of the world, to not make them feel like they're outsiders, basically. So the deaf community has actually had a lot of openings within the world, how they're starting to become more a part of our world, I guess, in a way. Another thing in how the deaf community has become a part of our world and our daily lives would be American Sign Language. American Sign Language is a very important language for them, especially because that's how they communicate. According to, Deaf Communications and Other Communication Disorders in 2014, www.nidcd.nih.org. So the deaf community uses American Sign Language, which is a form of communicating with basically your body. So the motions and how you do things, the way you express yourself, whether it is raising your eyebrows, whether it is nodding your head. So it uses basically your entire body. But American Sign Language has been around for maybe only 200 years, but this has been a huge part in what the deaf community is, because it has allowed them to be able to communicate on a daily basis with us, what we are called hearing people to them. So as you can see, there is different ways of how to say thank you, bye, hello, how to spell your name. Yeah, so the deaf community is, this is their main language and how they speak. Another way in how the deaf community kind of is important for us to know is that we shouldn't find a way of how to fix them. We should kind of have an idea that they are who they are and are able to live a fulfilling life. Nowadays, because of the technology we have, people want to encourage a lot of deaf people to use cochlear implants. And a lot of people within the deaf community feel like they're trying to fix them because they feel like they are, like a disability to them, to other people. Within the article, according to Allegra Ringo in 2013 from The Atlantic, the article, Understanding the Deaf Community and Not Fixing the Deaf Community. So in the article, there is this one specific person. So the article is based off of basically this organization. This organization is called the Alexander Graham Association. And this association, their main mission that they have is that they are trying to help the deaf community and how to, whether it is with teachers, with parents, with healthcare, and how to make them feel a part of their daily living. There is this one specific part where Ruth, who is a deaf person, says that the association is only targeting hearing parents because if you think about it, like as a parent, you want to do the best for your child and you want to do anything and everything for them, basically. So she feels that what this association is only trying to do is target those parents because a lot of times that's what we want to do for our kids and we want to just fix or help what we can. But what the hearing parents don't understand is how well of a life that they can live now because of all the organizations they have, whether it is here at school, because I know even here at Long Beach, there is classes for American Sign Language. And so a lot of people who are deaf feel kind of attacked basically by the idea of the implants because it's a way of them being fixed. But it doesn't always work out that way because as you can see in this one, this is a deaf child who in their world, they're normal, they're fine, but then once they have the implant, it's a surgical implant, so it could affect them in many other ways. Now they have to learn how to pronunciate and use their voice and use an actual language with their voice. So it kind of scars them for life because now they have to obtain to a new normal, basically. And so a lot of people within the deaf community don't agree with cochlear implants. They just want to be accepted for who they are and people to acknowledge that they can live a fulfilling life. So overall, the deaf community can be any kind of person in the world, doesn't affect a certain type of religion or race. And then the deaf community also is known to be able to communicate with American Sign Language. So it's important for us to know those things as well as what fixing the deaf community, that we should have kind of pushed to something like that. And so the suggested action or the texts that I have, this is like a really common show. It's, I believe, an ABC Family, the show. So the redhead is actually someone who is within the deaf community, and we see her life as it goes. She goes to a normal school where they speak and they do everything, and her best friend is deaf, but then her sister is not deaf. So she kind of interacts with both worlds. And then also, when I was looking up the deaf community, this was a book that came up, or not a book, but a movie that came up multiple times. So if you're interested in kind of knowing a little bit, there's this movie that's through Deaf Eyes. And yeah, that's my presentation.